Welcome to the Utilization of Money podcast with Todd Levine from Levine Financial Group. In this podcast, we teach our clients how to own their personal economy. Join us on this journey where we build upon your greatest asset as Todd draws from his years of expertise, solutions, strategies, and expert guest stories to help you understand how money works.
Hello and welcome to Utilization of Money with Todd Levine from Levine Financial Group. Today I'm pretty excited. This is part 2 of a 2-part series that Todd is doing on 401k. Good morning, Todd. How are you?
Good morning, Eric. I think the one thing that we made clear in the first podcast was that the 401k is a vehicle that most people use, but certainly don't really fully understand. So it has some great benefits, like we discussed in our, in the initial podcast. But if you don't know how to utilize it appropriately, it could have a negative impact on your financial plan long term.
Absolutely. All right. Without further ado, let's jump into it.
One of my main concerns about the 401k is the lack of liquidity it provides over a long period of time. So one of the things we talk about a lot is, when young professionals come into our office, they're so excited about the idea of starting to save for their future. They're ready and prepared to take the first dollar they ever make and put it into a vehicle that can't be utilized for another 35 to 40 years. And if you think about that, it sounds kind of silly, but when we talk to our, to our clients, especially our younger professional clients, we want them to understand this. It's like, listen, this is a for savings. It has a lot of benefits to it, but you're not going to be able to utilize this money over a very long period of time. And through this period of time, there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen in your life. You're going to probably want to buy a home, maybe an investment property. Maybe there's going to be some hard times in regards to your job, maybe being laid off or demoted. Maybe there's going to be health issues where you can't really work in the same capacity. There might be some other issues surrounding your family where you're going to need instant access to cash, etc. So this is something to think about because just like we talked about in that first podcast, this is primarily one of the key areas where people save most of their expendable cash flow. So if it's all going into this one area, we certainly want them to know and understand that there are some things that we need to be aware of, and the lack of liquidity is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we spoke about that in the first podcast, where I thought one thing was pretty good about the 401k, and that was that you could take a loan out on it, that you loan money to yourself. But because of my lack of education, because I didn't know and didn't read all the fine print and all that jazz, and I didn't talk to a professional advisor, which is, again, my mistake, I did take a loan out on my 401k, but I didn't realize that if you leave your job, the entire amount of that loan is due within about 30 days, I think, is the rule. And if you don't have that cash, it comes out of your retirement account, and then you get penalties, and you're also taxed as that as income. And if I had known that back then, I probably would have made a different choice, because looking at today's job market, people are shifting around all the time, either by choice or, like you said, what if you're downsized? What if you get laid off or you're fired from your job just because they're downsizing the company and you have a loan on your 401k? That's your responsibility to pay it back right then. That's no good because, again, you thought it was a little bit liquid, but it really wasn't. It ended up hurting us pretty badly.
Yeah, of course. And, so the penalties are something that a lot of people are not aware of, believe it or not. Your example in the first podcast of that loan becoming a distribution and you having to put it back at a certain period of time, or actually having to pay ordinary income and a 10% penalty on it, is something that a lot of people just don't realize. Also, from a liquidity standpoint, I think, it limits you from how much money you could actually really get out if, in fact, you are still working with the employer. So 50% up to $50,000. And one of the things we talk about all the time is that $50,000 is a pretty interesting cap, because, if you have $1 million inside this plan, you can only get $50,000. If in fact you have an opportunity that presents itself to where you need to access more than $50,000, you can't do that. So it limits opportunities. and certainly gives you the feeling that, hey, listen, maybe I shouldn't purchase this or I shouldn't purchase this because I don't have the money. Whereas a lot of the things that we talk about in regards to utilizing money is that we want our clients to go out and we want our clients to be able to create wealth outside of these traditional type of plans.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just simply don't have the liquidity to do this because all of their expendable cash is going to a place like this. So it is something to definitely think about. I have an example. I have a client, he's a great client. He's been a friend of mine for a very long period of time. And we've been doing planning and he has his money going into several different areas. One of the key areas that he had his money go into when we met was the retirement 401k plan. And he has some non-qualified monies. These monies are being managed, on a managed platform correlated to the equity markets. And then some other sort of areas to where, he can access liquidity, savings accounts, money market accounts, whole life insurance, and different types of vehicles like this. Mm-hmm. So he calls me up and he says, so I'm really excited. I want to buy this home. And he's like, where should we pull the money from? And, so this was not his first home. So the first time home buyer exclusion was out the window, although that still wouldn't have covered the deposit or the down payment that he would have needed. Mm-hmm. So now we're looking at possible distribution scenarios. So the money then was used to be in a 401k, was rolled over to an IRA. So he had possible distribution scenarios. So he was limited in that on that side of it because if in fact he pulled money from this account, he was going to suffer those same penalties, right? He was having to pay ordinary income and he was going to have to pay a 10% penalty. Mm-hmm. There was another option that he had, which was to utilize the money in a 6-day rollover period, which means they can actually pull the money out. And if he puts the money back within 60 days, there'll be no penalties or taxes. That's a lot of pressure because we all know when you buy a new home, things come up every single day.
Yeah.
So someone might say, oh, I'm going to pull the money out and then put it right back in. And generally that never happens. So now our other option was the investment account. So the investment account was interesting because the investment account was performing really well and he was making, high rates of return in the market, and the market just happened to be doing well at that period of time. So he said, well, if I take out of my investment account, then I now lose my ability to earn any sort of rate of return on that money. Mm-hmm. So that's going to create what we call lost opportunity cost. So it became like an issue because he didn't really have any other money saved outside of these accounts to where he can put down on the house, any sort of accounts that can be leveraged or collateralized. And that presented an issue. So no matter how we looked at this scenario, it was going to create lost opportunity costs, whether it was from pulling from the 401k plan that was going to create penalties and fees, and or pulling from an investment account, and then he was going to disinvest himself at that period of time when the markets were doing really well. So this just really goes to the issue of this 401k became his primary asset, but it also became a primary asset that he could not use. Then he was forced to look elsewhere mm-hmm. to other assets, but these other assets were then he didn't want to touch either for the other reasons that I just described.
So Todd, let me ask you this: and I don't want to get too personal into this one individual story, but was this an investment property or was this like a second vacation home kind of situation?
This was a primary residence.
Oh, I thought he already had a primary residence.
Well, no, he was moving to it. He was buying another home. Like he was getting rid of.
Gotcha.
He was kind of found another home that he felt was better for his needs.
So he was going to be purchasing that. It was still
going to be his primary, correct?
Yep. Got it. Okay. So and maybe it's, I don't know if this is state by state. I actually do not know the rule on this, but if you don't have at least 20% down as a down payment, in most cases, you have to also pay PMI, primary mortgage insurance, correct?
That's correct.
So in your scenario, if you can't pull enough out in a loan for a 401k to cover that 20% down payment, you're still going to end up paying extra. So you're losing more money again, because now you have to pay an extra set of insurance on the home because you didn't put 20% down. because you didn't have the flexibility from the 401k. And so it is kind of a hard circle. That's a difficult decision to make. So what did he end up doing?
So we did not touch the retirement account. We, I was actually not in favor of that. I can't see paying those penalties and fees to access the money. So what we did was we were creative, and he pulled some money from his investment accounts, a small portion of it, a small portion from some of his money market money, and then a small portion from cash values and whole life insurance. So it was a nice blend where we kind of limited his loss opportunity costs across the board. But it did present a problem. It presented a problem, I think, from the get-go, because he didn't realize all this. Exactly. He was thinking, well, I have all this money in this retirement account, and I'm just going to utilize it. And it just was not the case. To our previous conversation is that it's not always what it seems. People don't really understand until they actually get into a situation when they have to utilize their money, and then they sort of learn the hard way, and it's very hard to navigate through without a financial professional on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about my mistakes in the first podcast, and that's exactly what it was I didn't have a financial professional that I consulted. Oh, they're out there. I just didn't do it. So that's on me. But even when you do have a financial professional, a lot of people, like you said, they just think, well, I've got these retirement accounts, there shouldn't be a problem. I've heard about the ability to take a loan off of it, and everything sounds really, really good. But when you get to the brass tacks and really look at the nuts and bolts of everything, it's not a positive thing in a lot of cases. So what other things do we need to cover today?
Yeah, of course. One of the key things that we look at all the time is how can we get our clients to the end of the day, to retirement, and how can we do it in the most efficient way by taking as little risk as possible? Some people say that can't be done, right? The only way to really accumulate wealth is to have some sort of market exposure, which is somewhat true. But I do believe that if you have a broad, diverse financial plan, I believe that we can still get there and minimize our risk, taxes, and fees along the way. Okay, so market risk is from a timing standpoint, it could present problems later on. Okay, so we have something called sequence of returns risk. And sequence of returns risk is something that I guess is part of the podcast, which we'll get to, is when we're taking distributions. So most people are in these 401k plans for a very, very long period of time. And so what they say is if you're young and you're in the market, over a long period of time, you're going to see a nice average rate of return in the market if you're just investing in the S&P 500. And that's somewhat true. Right? If you look at historical data and you go back 20, 30 years at a time, and you'll see a lot of volatility along the way, but you also see if you were to stay the course, your average rate of return would be potentially X, right? 5-6% if you're reinvesting dividends. I don't want you to quote me on that number, but it's close to that over a long period of time. So people say no problem. The challenge is that a lot of people don't realize all the things that are going to happen to them in their lives over this period of time, just like we talked about, just like your example. So it wasn't planned that way. It just happened that way. And so the challenge is from a timing standpoint, we never know where these plans are going to be based around what's happening in your life. So if you find yourself in a situation where you need to take a distribution or a loan from this, or you need to roll it over to another, roll over the 401k. If you lose your job, roll over the 401k to an IRA, and then you want to take a distribution. We have no idea where the market's going to be at that point in time. What we have realized is that when people need money, they're going to take it wherever they feel they can go and get it. So the market is great if you can withstand all the volatility along the way and not touch it. Now, if that's one thing, but let's look at 2008. So if you were getting ready to retire in 2008, what happened? Well, the market was down substantially, right? We went to a financial crisis. So if you were looking at your 401k one value and you were getting ready to retire, well, the value the next day was not the same. It was a lot lower. So from a timing standpoint, it was no good for those people who were getting ready to retire in that time frame. Mm-hmm. And so all those years of the growth and consistency and the volatility, because you had time, was okay. But unfortunately, because of that particular time was when you were going to start taking distributions from an income standpoint, retirement, the market was down. It left you with very little options. Yeah. Your only option would be is either start drawing from a lesser amount, which you'll never be able to recover the money that was lost in that one particular year right before you were getting ready to retire, or work longer. Okay, so it's very important to understand that the market could certainly benefit us over a period of time, but it's also important to understand that from a timing standpoint, we have no control over that.
Exactly.
So it's very important to understand that, hey, listen, if I'm going to look to start taking distributions in this period of time, maybe I should really be dialed into the allocation and make sure I don't have as much risk in the market. The challenge is most people, or a lot of people, have been underfunding their plans, or along the way have hit some rough roads. So they might not have the ability to do that because they feel that if they dial it back, then they might not hit their retirement goal. So the market becomes a really tricky play here because it's not as simple as just putting your money in one area and waiting 30 years and then it's all gravy. It's all, beautiful at the end of the day. There's a lot of moving pieces from a timing standpoint, plus from just an environmental thing. It's just what's happening around us, like what's going on, what's happening in our lives over a 30-year period. I feel that we could probably achieve the same goals by not having that type of exposure to the equity markets. And that's really bigger picture type of planning. I'm just looking at the 401k and saying, okay, well, it is a positive, but we also feel it's a negative.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. What other negatives do we have to cover today?
There's a lot. Okay, so
we do have a limited amount of time. Yeah, no, be honest, please. Tell us the truth. Yeah. That's what we want.
So limited investment options. And this is something where it's gotten better over time. And when I say limited investment options, there might be some people listening and saying, well, I have great options, through my employer-based 401k plan, through Vanguard or whatever funds they're offering. That's true. Okay. But we could also make the argument that if the money wasn't in the 401k, we would have a whole array of different types of diversification and assets available to us, or investment options available to us to invest in. So I think we're kind of limited to what our employer what their employer plan has designed. Okay. So, so we look at it as, if somebody leaves their 401k, or they leave their employer, move to another job, and they have now this 401k, and their options are they can roll it into their existing plan, or they can roll it into an IRA. We will look at all their options, but sometimes the best option would be to roll to an IRA to be able to take advantage of some alternative investment options that might not be available to them within that same employer plan.
Got it. Yeah. Yep. I understand that. And one of the things that you spoke about in the last podcast, as we barely touched on, was fees associated with 401ks.
Of course, yeah. Fees, it's a challenge. And I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that there's high internal fees inside these funds. And there's also fees, actual, 401k account fees. So what people are seeing is in their statement is their year-to-date rate of return, or what their overall rate of return is, but they're not understanding or seeing what's going on with the fees. Now, in 401k plans, they can range anywhere from 1% to 2%. In 403bs, we've seen them as high as almost 3%. Then what happens is because we feel that these plans have limited investment options, so they have a lot of funds that share the same securities. So people, they don't understand. They're just picking funds. They're like, oh, this looks like a good fund. This looks like a good fund. and they're diversifying in their own way. So outside of the fees that are going on internally, there's some overlapping going on, meaning they have different types of funds that hold the same securities. So they're paying these high fees on same securities. So there's a lack of diversification, higher fees. We feel the high fees over a long period of time, or this type of overlapping, will definitely erode their overall growth. People are not seeing that, certainly. Their 401k representative saying, look, you're doing an amazing job, you're up 7. Well, maybe if there was less overlapping and better diversification, maybe the account would be up 10. Yeah. Right. So they're not seeing that, but we could easily measure that here versus some of our managed settings and some of our other options available to us, where we can actually control the fees much better and make sure that there really is limited or no overlapping in regards to funds. So now the clients could kind of fully engage and say, okay, well, I know exactly what my fee structure is. And then we could really just focus on the growth aspect of it. But when you're just putting your money into a 401k over a very long period of time, and you have to deal with these market fluctuations and fees and overlapping, it really does pull a drag. A lot of people won't necessarily see that, but the truth is it's there.
Yeah. All right, Todd, we are running low on time. And here's the thing is that I thought we were going to wrap the podcast up today. I don't want to be gloom and doom here, but there's a lot we haven't even touched. And we are really low on time. Like I said, can we continue this on another podcast?
Absolutely. I think it's important, because really what this is education. This is really just fully understanding where your money's going and some of the things to look out for. So I would love that, because I certainly don't want to miss on any of the important topics that we've talked about. Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. We're talking about a buffet, honestly, because there's so much stuff here that if you go to a buffet, there's a lot of good. There's salad. There's all sorts of healthy choices, but there's usually also an ice cream machine, which if you just spend your time sitting in front of the ice cream machine, that could get bad and very quickly, depending on how you choose to spend your time. And that's kind of what this is. You're spending your time on your education. If you're not educated, like I'll be very open and honest and admit that I was not educated when I made some of my decisions early in life, it came back and bit us. So I love the fact that you're willing to spend this amount of time with the audience, with your clients, really educating them on the possibilities, right? What can this possibly be used for in a good way? And what other things can we incorporate into your plan that are going to make you more secure for the future, have a little bit more flexibility so you can get that second house or change houses without, losing opportunities. So I love it. Todd, thank you so much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
Hey, you bet. And we'll look forward to the next one. And you won't want to miss it. So I'm going to ask you to subscribe to the podcast. Everybody in the audience, there is a button down below on your screen that helps you to subscribe to the podcast. Do that. And this way, when Todd comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And it'll make it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at Levine Financial Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Utilization of Money podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.
Todd Levine, registered representative and financial advisor of Park Avenue Securities, LLC, PAS. Security products and advisory services offered through PAS, member FINRA SIPC. Financial representative of the Guardian Life Insurance Company of America, Guardian, New York, New York. PAS is an indirect, wholly owned subsidiary of Guardian. Levine Financial Group is not an affiliate or subsidiary of PAS or Guardian. Guardian, its subsidiaries, agents, and employees do not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Consult your tax, legal, or accounting professional regarding your individual situation. All investment and investment strategies contain risk and may lose value. A loan or withdrawal reduces the benefits in the life insurance policy and may cause a taxable event. Talk to your financial professional in regards to your specific situation. Arkansas Insurance License Number 1567072 and California Insurance License Number 0H01258. 2019-90904, expiration 12 of 21.